I'm Connie Raub, and I'm here at First Congregational Church, and we're doing these interviews for the 150th anniversary of our church. That's in 2024. Today is August the 22nd, 2023, and I'm here with Del Hokanson. We have an interview with Del and with Pete in another interview, but since she has done so much for the church and has been so involved with our children and other things as well, we thought it was important for her to share her story separately. So that's what we're going to do today. So I'm welcoming you, Del, and
thank you.
It's good to have you. And I'm going to kind of let you tell your story because I know that you may want to tell us, when you joined the church and then how things progressed.
Wow. Well, first of all, it's a privilege to be asked to share, but it's also been a privilege to be a part of this community and to grow in a role that has given me so many opportunities and so many chances to meet so many wonderful people, so children and parents and other adults. I guess first of all, I just want to say that for many years Pete and I were just in the pew, and that was meaningful enough. And then we went back to Australia for 5 years for a job change for me, and Pete was Mr. Mom. And after those 5 years coming back to this place, I think we recognized what a rare place this was. We found a similar community in Australia with the justice issues, especially for Aboriginals, and it was kind of the equivalent of the UCC down there. But it was a small community, and we just realized how flourishing this place was and how many more opportunities. And so I think we came back with a realization that we wanted to get more engaged. And
now, when was this period of time?
So we went back in 97. So we arrived here, I think we were members in 94. Mm-hmm. So we'd been here several years and then went back for 5 years and came back in 2002. So in 2002, Pete was back at Palmer High School, and I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with my life after teaching down there. And Lynn Young approached me about an OWL training in San Francisco. And I thought, that sounds really cool. Like, it was a very important part of, I'd taught health ed in Australia in the high schools, and I just realized how narrow and in some ways dangerous it was, because it gave sort of information but not anything about relationship. And so I looked at the OWL program, and it was very comprehensive and powerful. And so I was on. That was.
And she was just starting.
She was doing the trainings, and she was And I think they had John Veen in the wings already trained, and they were looking for a female, and so we just fitted that. And so I started teaching OWL in the 8-9 program here at First Cong with John Veen, and I think we created the inaugural program and the bigger program around that, because it's for all years. In fact, Pete was saying he taught the kindergarten grade 1 program.
Yes.
So I taught the 8-9 with John Veen for 10 years, and probably had wonderful journeys with over 80 teenagers in this community. So that was kind of the start, was the OWL. And then out of OWL, I sat on the education committee.
And OWL is?
Our Whole Lives, Sexuality and a Faith, and it's a UCC comprehensive sexuality program, which I will just say forever, even more so now with all the judgment of nationally what's going on in Florida, etc. I just feel like OWL is such a wonderful program in so many ways. As a teacher, working with teenagers, understanding relationships for teenagers and just their development, and this was very important. Plus, it's been very important for our family. Even though my daughters will say, "Mom, how come you're teaching us sexuality?" And I always said I'd never be a teacher for them. I always wanted them to have their independent, and yet here I am in a church teaching sexuality. So, but now, even in their 30s, we will have OWL conversations. It's been such an important program for our family life. And also the relationship with many of the students. I know that there's a couple who got married, one who went to Boulder and was in a college lecture and had another person speak very similarly and the value system, and they started talking to each other and realized that they had both been through Al in different churches, and Ben Broadbent ended up marrying them. So I mean, there's a lot of beautiful stories just around Al. And then I sat on the education committee for several years, and then soon after that I was serving on council, so for the representative for education. And oddly enough, I was also teaching third graders science and maths at the Renaissance Academy for 5 years, and that school closed down the very same week that Lynn Boudreau stepped up for the role as coordinator of education.
I know.
And I'd helped to actually write that job description while I was on council, so like I knew what it was, and I thought, well, I could do that, and so I applied, and so that's how I started off in that role as a staff member in this church.
I know.
Very different role.
We were so excited because just the fact that it was working out so perfectly.
Timing.
With the timing. And
Well,
we knew
that kind
that
of feels
was
like a God piece. I don't know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I never thought I'd actually be working in a church, but it's been one of the biggest gifts. And I can see how it's about the values. And it doesn't matter whether I'm coaching kids in high school in field hockey. Like, it's still about the spiritual development of the internal relationship with each other. And so now, rather than a hockey stick for 40 years, I actually had a Bible. And it was a similar kind of tool. So anyway, from the Renaissance Academy closing and for me applying for this job, it started off as a coordinator of education and then ended up as the director of children's and family ministry. That kind of evolved as our church was evolving, as our staff with Ben Broadbent was evolving our roles. So, and I have endless wonderful memories from the 12 years of working with children in this church community. And it's not just with the children, it's with the whole families, the people who would come and help me with Casey worship. So very cross-generational, ended up building relationships way beyond whatever I conceived at the start of my job. So I'll try and concise this a little bit. The fondest memory, obviously, is just the weekly Casey worships. Trying to build a kids' community, the idea that the kids had a community too, just like the big people, and how to help them understand their role within that community, and that they had relationship and bonds as well. And out of that, developing the leadership with the Ubuntus, and sort of trying to get the kids to understand, just like the big church.
Can you explain what the Ubuntu?
Ubuntu is a Xhosa culture word, meaning how can I be happy if you're not happy? And there's a beautiful, you can Google it, a beautiful way of children sharing mandarins with each other before they could have their own Mandarin. And it's an African cultural thing, and it's just a beautiful way to me of expanding upon who we are in this church. And so the Ubuntu, just developing those ideas and working with children and their little faces every Sunday morning.
But that led to leadership, because the older children, as they grew in that, began to take on
the younger. Yeah, and it helped them to model appropriate behavior.
Yes.
With godly behavior with each other. So certainly all of that was just a gift, and that's not that different than how I teach. So that was just a transference of how I work in the classroom or how I coach on the field. The relationships with parents was just very deepening and wonderful. I would say that preparing for Rally Day, even though it was kind of stressful, all the different Rally Days and the themes that we had were really fun. Whether it was walking with God and big backpacks and footprints everywhere, or God gives a growth, and having a whole year based on trees and growth and how do we grow and how we're connected to the environment. I really appreciated the space, the scientific one, and transferring the Casey worship into a science lab. And having all the kids put on their lab coats as they come in, the cloak of God, the cloak of love, and so just being able to just have this open-ended opportunity was just delightful. And working with the parents with ideas and cooking up all those ideas was great. And then out of that, at the end of each summer, the summer camps and how they connected because, you know, I didn't actually have a vacation Bible school curriculum that I wanted to follow. I wanted something that was more non-traditional, like this church. And so creating those were really fun and a year-long process in many ways. And the ultimate one, I think, was working with Chris Steenbergen. And we made an aeroplane in the atrium. And I was just like, and that was to do with walkabout. So it was Walk with God. It followed the theme, and then it helped me bring in a lot of Australian context as well, the Aboriginals' connection to the earth. And we did a lot of labyrinth walking, and so just delightful, like having the kids get on this aeroplane and have this kind of journey into the universe. It was really cool. So some of those things were just really powerful and beautiful and shared, because you share with Chris Steenbergen, how are you going to do an airplane? And you deepen into a relationship. So that's really cool. And I think out of the airplane one, it was like, oh my gosh, how can I keep building something different for next year? And actually it was out of that the multi-faith camp grew.
Oh, really?
Because it was like, I've had an airplane in the atrium, how can I make this bigger? And so it was the multi-faith camp.
Yeah.
And the spindle that I took around to each of the communities to introduce the idea that we're not proselytizing, that everybody's born with a spool, we're not changing your spool, we're just going to add color to it, which I remember a rabbi at Colorado College had talked about at a forum that I went to there, and I never forgot that. I thought, yeah, we're all born with a spool. Mine's Lutheran. Some people don't have a spool color at all. They just, you know, maybe grew up in an agnostic family, or maybe it's Catholic. So whatever it is, you have your spool, but that doesn't mean to say you can't add color and different colored threads from different experiences. So that was my tool, and out of that grew the multi-faith camps. And the relationship with Nawal from the Muslim community, Deborah Sana from the Jewish community, and Sister Damadira from the Buddhist community. I mean, we are girlfriends. And it has just been so illuminating, enlightening, and truly discovering that we have much more in common than we think we are different. And so it was a real spiritual growth for me with these friendships, and the whole experience of preparing for it and then taking these children and exposing them to different faiths was probably, to me, the most important legacy I may have left this world, and the friendships through that. So out of that, also the biggest honor that I've received through my job was when John Dorhow, the president of the UCC, invited me to be a part of his sermon at the National Synod in Baltimore.
Yes.
And that is probably the most ultimate mountain experience that I've ever had. And to share it with Emily was really fun. I mean, we had a blast. And so that was awesome. And then also out of that experience, I was able to go to the World Parliament of Religions in Toronto. Oh. And that was another, again, like transcendent experience of goodness. And when I feel what I do now about everything that's going on globally, this was the absolute opposite of being surrounded by people from across the world and all these different faiths who just had this loving, caring affection for everybody. And it was just a wonderful experience. So I really appreciate that. I have to say, finally, with mixed emotions, I say this, with the whole pandemic shifts, with doing online services. I never thought that I would be kind of like now being like on a screen in my 60s. It's not what I was imagining the last final years of my teaching would be, doing online children's messages. But that was really fun with David.
Oh,
I have to
wonderful.
say, David and myself, just that whole like opportunity to like create something very different. The first Palm Sunday that we did together in Garden of the Gods, and then the big Christmas event with all the families, and we're trying to work out how to do in Jackie's backyard with the horses and everything. You know, they was sort of like daunting, but like well, why not?
It was so
we could try
fun
this
each time.
Yeah, and so and it was kind of trusting that this community will be okay. You know, like it was always about like the faith that the people have given me. I could try and give something back, and so yeah, I did not think that the pandemic children's messages would be my final fling, but it was funny ending my career that way in some ways. And I said, truly, just the relationship with David and the staff and the community to do those things was pretty powerful.
Well, I don't know whether you want to touch on this, but there have been some difficult times here too, and I think one of your legacies, one of many, is your love for this church. And there were some difficult times, but you were so honest and open and willing to show your love.
Yeah, very complex times. It was an interesting time in that I felt in some ways that I was collateral damage in it. Like I knew that I wasn't being blamed, or I felt the love. I felt so much love around that time, which probably gave me a little bit more confidence to speak up and try and represent all the people that were hurt and through all of that. And I guess I was of an age where I felt like I could trust my loving God and somehow speak about what's important and what I'd experienced in this place. And it took a lot of guts. I'm not the one who wants to grab the microphone, and I'm not the one who's going to be the, as with the pandemic children's message, the one to be out front. And I like sort of leading from behind. I like leading with people, and that's how I coach. And so it was an interesting opportunity that's kind of, to me, landed in my lap. And to speak at that congregational meeting took a lot of courage.
Yes.
And put myself on the line. But I felt like I didn't have anything to lose. I had to represent people so far beyond my own challenge. I'm comfortable with that. And I guess, one of the things that I said in my previous thing about, the advice to the future is to remember that we have to practice who we claim to be. And in that practice, we need to learn to forgive.
Yes. And
that was a pretty big step for me because I was pretty hurt. And the way it happened, it wasn't what happened, it was the way it was brought upon the 5 staff members, just like without really any warning.
Right.
And no communication. And that's just not who we are. And so I just wanted to address and speak to that, is that the process, yes, there may be needs and we may need to work out how to do things here, but this is not how we do it in this church. And so it was more about that. And I felt pain for so many people. And again, it wasn't my pain alone.
It was a trust that was broken. And I think that this is the value of all of these things. If the church going forward in the future doesn't understand that we've been through hard times before and have survived, then how are we really honestly preparing people for the future? There will be more hard times.
There will be. We're humans, and we have flaws, and you nailed it. I mean, to me, and that was my response when I was brought into the office after we were fired. That was my question. And I say it to this day. How are you going to rebuild the trust? How are you going to do that? So you make a decision, but have you had some foresight to look at how you've broken a lot of trust in a lot of different areas of this church, and how are you going to rebuild that? And that's where the forgiveness comes in, and that's where we all have a part of that.
Yes.
It's not just one person's decision, but we all have a part of how to rebuild that trust. And I see that happening. And I have a lot of faith. That's the advice for the future, is that I see that all things are possible when we have God in our heart, and if it's a loving God, forgiveness comes and trust rebuilds, and that's where we are right now, and I really believe that's where we are.
Well, thank you, Del. Thank you for sharing so many things with us, and I feel very honored to have been here with you today.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate being asked, and appreciate being able to actually share, because that's part of the forgiveness piece too.
Yeah.
To be invited and to be able to share how important this place is to me, and the people, and the loving God. Like, it transcends me. So thank you. And thank you to the guys who are doing all this.
Yes, exactly.